Hello there. This is something to talk about from the Bainbridge Island Senior Community Center. I'm Reed Price, and we're going to be talking about gardening today with Anne Lovejoy and friends who have been out making the senior center gardens absolutely gorgeous. I want to first start by mentioning that Fieldstone Communities of Bainbridge Island is the sponsor of something to talk about. They offer assisted independent living and memory care up on Rolling Bay, and they have day stay and respite programs. You can learn more. You can even enjoy a free lunch. Call 206-594-1010 or email ashleyc@fieldstonecommunities.com to learn more. And that's their website, fieldstonecommunities.com. Also, we would like to acknowledge that we are meeting on the ancestral homeland of the Puget Sound Coast Salish people, the people of the clear salt water, the Suquamish, who have lived here since time immemorial. We honor them, and we are learning from their stewardship of these lands and waters. Hello, Anita and Anne and Rita
And Nancy.
and Nancy.
Hello.
Hello. So
Here we are.
there you are. So it's a beautiful day for gardening, and we've been having a lot of nice days for gardening, which is an inspiration to go out and sort of make steps. We've passed Mother's Day, which means that we're sort of in tomato season even.
Not
So
quite.
oh,
Oh.
that's how we spend all of the spring, isn't it? Me saying it's tomato time and you saying not quite.
Not quite. It's true, Reed. You know, one of the things, people are so hot to trot with the tomatoes, but what happens with tropicals when they're planted out and the day temperatures, as I've said before, reflect the night temperatures. So in the day, it might be 70 and at night it might be 46 or 42 or 48. But what the tomatoes and beans and peppers, what they're looking for is the mid 50s. So I don't put tomatoes in the ground until the night temperatures are consistently around 55 degrees. That's kind of the magic number for a lot of those heat-loving plants. Because if they go into cold soil, they actually get a little bit shocked. They've been grown in greenhouses. Now, one cool thing is that a lot of Northwestern growers have been growing tomatoes a little cooler in the last few years because they have had so many people buy early, complain that the plants died or just never progressed. And yeah, well, that's what happens. But because they've been grown a little cooler, they are a little bit more resilient. And they're also a little slower to take off sometimes. If they don't trust it, they have to wait a while, make sure it's really going to be warm enough. But one thing you can do, of course, is if you just cannot wait, put them in a big container, like a tree pot. I mean, a 35 gallon pot. And then they're usually dark color, which absorbs warmth and holds it better. And that'll be warmer than the ground, which is a good start, right? And a good size for even a cherry tomato, that's a regular sized plant, is 30 to 35 gallon container, which is sometimes several bags of soil, right? So you have to remember that the
That's
little
what I
pot is
use.
not going to
That's
do
what I
it.
use. That's what I use when I go to Tills to collect the wood chips.
Yeah, the big ones. And if your neighbors are getting trees planted, you can just go in there and ask if they want their giant pots. They usually go, no, I was going to throw them away, God forbid. But you can usually pick them up that way. I find them a lot, really often. The other place you can look for pots is at Lowe's, because Lowe's has a program. Every Lowe's has a big bin somewhere, and you ask them where it is. It's in the garden section. And you can trade pots. You can bring used clean pots and leave them off, and you can collect used clean pots. And they've told me at each store I've been to, they almost never throw anything away, and there's very little broken. And sometimes big planter containers show up, as the staff told me really happily, like, I got these cool, right? So it's worth checking out if you're over in Silverdale. And it's a great thing to know. You don't have to put all those planting pots into the trash. Please don't do that. Recycle.
Okay. Now we're going to try something new today, and I'm hoping that the four of you can kind of have a conversation. You don't have to worry so much about looking up at the screen,
Good.
and we'll just look over your shoulder. And if Marcy or somebody has a question, we'll do that later.
Great. That sounds wonderful. Yeah, and this is fun because before COVID, we met like this every month on the third Wednesday. And then, of course, we switched over to doing the Zoom thing, which none of us, remember, we all were just like, I didn't know how to do it. But now we're pretty comfortable with it. And I think it's kind of great because you don't have to be here. And a lot of these programs get viewed many times after the fact because people are day busy, as they used to say. So one of the things we can do is like bring your questions, which is great, and kind of think about the kinds of stuff people ask you too. Like you said, you had been getting questions from people too. And so bring them, that's the great way to get going.
Okay. I do have a question. Are we ready for questions?
Yeah, we are.
Well, since we were talking about tomato plants and, I knew too that it's still too early. And I even thought the soil had to be 40 degrees and you're saying it should be warmer. Now, what do I do? I want little sun gold cherry tomatoes. They're difficult for me to find. There seem to be the first little cherry tomatoes that disappear. I mean, I was up at the store yesterday and it was all I could do to keep, from not buying something. And they didn't even have. So the point is, the question is, okay, if I see sun gold, I'm going to buy it when I see it.
Yeah.
What do I do with it to keep it?
Yes, and that's a great question. So if you bought it, the first thing, and if it's in a fairly small pot, which they mostly are, the first thing you would do is put it in a quart or a gallon. If it's in a 4-inch pot, put it
Okay,
in a quart. If it's in a quart already, put it in a gallon.
okay,
And then put it on a sunny windowsill, or if you have an unheated sun porch or any place like that where it gets good light. Now, it would much rather have morning and midday light. It does not necessarily want the blasting light of afternoon. So an afternoon window might be too hot because the glass actually creates too much heat. Is that all you have?
yeah. Well, unless I was thinking, can I put it in my bedroom window or?
Yeah, why not, right?
Okay, okay.
I mean, I have little plant stands you can move around to, if you don't have
So it can be indoors?
it should be indoors.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
in a deep saucer. Because the other thing that starts to happen indoors is, of course, you water the plant, it oozes all over the place, and suddenly you've made a giant mess in your bedroom or somewhere. So I buy deep saucers when they're on sale and get a bunch of them. So you always have, and then water from the bottom as well as the top.
Okay.
And if you water from the top and you notice the saucer fills, it means the potting soil has shrunk and the water's just running down the sides.
Mm,
And so and a lot of the mixtures that they come potted in have a lot of peat moss in them, which is really hard to re-wet. So the second good thing about those deep saucers is you can, if you see that happening, just leave it and it should all absorb.
Okay.
Right? And then add more until
Uh-huh.
it doesn't absorb anymore. And then
Okay.
for a good hour or two. And then if it's really saturated, then you can pour that into another plant.
Okay.
But make sure that it stays hydrated all the way, because all the growth on those tomatoes or anything else really, but especially tomatoes, it's the questing little roots that are looking around for nutrients, right? And so if they're in a 4-inch pot, they found them, and that's when they girdle. They're just doing a little round and round. So if you give the next size up, they get the chance to start moving, right? But as soon as they hit the wall of the pot, they're discouraged and they'll go up, down, sideways, right?
Uh-huh.
So that's why if in a really cold year and you bought those in late April, you're going to be holding them for a while. So maybe they outgrow the quart, and you notice when you're watering that there's roots coming out the bottom of that quart. Then you're going to pot them up in a gallon.
Okay.
Maybe then to a 2.5. But then you'll have a really nice plant. right?
Okay.
Also, they've been watered and fed every 2 weeks at the nursery.
Mm,
So when you have them at home, you got to keep that up.
okay.
So I usually use like Dr. Earth, like
Yeah.
that one.
Yeah,
that you and I like that.
yeah.
Yeah. There's some liquid Dr. Earths.
Yeah.
And there's scratch in. But in the house plant, when you're in that stage, I usually use the liquid.
Okay.
And because one of the things you think about is like, if it's getting rinsed out, it's in a saucer, it's going to take it back up.
Okay.
So it will get all that nutrient. And every couple weeks, so I usually sort of put it in my calendar every other Sunday. It's
Oh.
usually not my busiest day, so I write it in there and
Yeah,
remember to,
Okay.
feed your plants. Because otherwise,
Write down
they don't have that much nutrient in their mixture.
No, they don't.
Right? And they don't have access to anything except they're really dependent on us, right?
Okay.
And if they get leggy, you can pinch the tops and encourage them to branch out a little bit more. And actually, if they get leggy, I don't really mind that because tomatoes will root all along their neck And so you plant them really deep,
Oh, right.
right?
Yeah, yeah.
And like here. And so if they get long, just put in a couple of, I've used chopsticks or something and tie them in gently and let them get long and then plant them deep so they're not long anymore, right? They're like up to here.
Okay.
And then they'll root all over the place. You need a lot of roots to balance the weight of the great big plant. And I always put the hoop, the tower around them as soon as I plant them.
Yeah,
Because otherwise they've got all these roots and just skewer them, right?
yeah. For sure.
I was dying to get some gold tomatoes, to find any. So I was over in Seattle on Mother's Day weekend and my neighbor told me that Cisco came on TV and said Mother's Day weekend was fine to plant tomatoes. And I thought, no, it's not. It's always been the end of Memorial Day at
Right.
least or
Right.
later. But then,
You
so
hate it.
anyway, they're two way over expensive tomatoes. And I did plant them super deep and I'm hoping for the best. They came in gallon
Yeah.
containers.
Oh,
They're good. Did they have good roots on them already?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah. it'll probably be
Yeah.
fine.
hope they're fine, but I'll hold off on the next.
Well, the other thing you can do if you've already
Yeah.
committed and they're in the ground is mulch, which will help conserve
Okay.
the both moisture and temperature. And also I use bubble wrap around the cage.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
You leave it open on the top so it can breathe. And if you're around all day, you can take it off when it gets warm and put it back on at night. But I just kind of leave them because mine go in the shade earlier than some. But that gives them some added protection too. It gives them that like nice protected blankie.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's a great
That's a good idea, because I've seen actually commercial things like that is expensive,
Everybody has some bubble wrap.
Yeah,
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 And I put it bubble side in because they tend not to break as much.
okay.
My grandkids are wild for popping, so it's like, no, we're doing the bubbles go in. But they do seem to last a little longer like that
Yeah.
too. And then I just use painter tape to kind of fasten,
Mhm.
Yeah.
shut
Mhm.
and write on the painter tape what it is. And when I planted it, like, 513, oops, or whatever, right? Oops. And then you have a little note.
yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's like the peer pressure of tomatoes, isn't it? It's like
Oh,
our neighbor
yeah.
has all of these.
And they put them out because people are asking.
I know the two nurseries on Bainbridge had them out in a month ago.
Yeah,
That's not right.
early.
Oh,
Fair.
I was up at Chimacum Corner the other week and they didn't have theirs yet.
Yeah.
Good for them.
I know that they're a little, they're a little more about, no, we're not gonna do this yet.
It might be a little cooler there too. I mean,
Yeah,
one thing is we're suburban. In Seattle, it's urban environment. It's actually warmer. There's so much reflected heat from the streets, the sidewalks, the houses are close together. It can be, when I lived up on the north end, my friends in town would have sometimes 15 degrees warmer
Yes.
Really?
than I was.
Yes.
Yeah.
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 So where you are, your microclimate can make a big difference too for how warm it is.
Yeah.
And if in doubt, if you have one of those instant read oven thermometers,
Okay.
that you stick in something,
Uh-huh.
stick it in the soil. You don't need to buy a soil thermometer. The temperature works the same for everything. And then just wash it, okay? It's not like, I know, right? Because people are like, ew, you put that in the dirt? And it's like, you think a raw chicken is any better than the dirt?
Exactly.
Just wash it, right?
Yeah.
But that's a good, I think there's so many gadgety things you can spend your money on. Save your money for plants.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, I start all my starts and my seeds in those, I still have these, they're ancient lettuce boxes, the kind with the plastic top that pops back on. Because they're like a little greenhouse.
Mhm.
And you poke some holes in the side, you put some soil in there, get the starts, and I'm snipping it with my nail scissors for my salad. You can grow microgreens like
Yeah.
that for a long time. And then you throw the whole thing in the compost and start again. Right?
Well, when you're talking about improvising tools, like for my houseplants, I do have a little whatever, thermometer or whatever. No, it measures not a thermometer, it's for water,
Moisture.
moisture. A moisture meter or whatever it's called. Wouldn't that work for my garden too?
Sure.
You were saying,
The best moisture meter is on your
Finger.
hand, really. Because I dig down and if it's dry, 2 inches down, it's dry.
that's never worked for me. I've tried it so many times. I think, am I so insensitive? I'm poking and I mean, I don't think I'm very accurate. So, yeah, I'll just take that motion.
Try your
I
other,
got it.
sometimes one hand is more callous than the other. If
Okay,
you're very right-handed or very left-handed, you'll find the other hand is more sensitive.
okay. I'll try.
I know, it's worth a try.
Yeah,
But you can also kind of pull it back a little bit and you can tell it's like this soil is dry.
yeah,
Yeah.
'Cause,
okay.
You know, if it's evenly moist and you squish it a little bit, it will kind of hold its shape.
Mm,
If it's too wet, it will pour out of your hand like
yeah,
mud,
okay.
right? And if it's
Okay.
too dry, it's like powder, which I've seen sometimes.
Yes.
It's like a starved soil that doesn't have enough nutrient in it, doesn't have enough compost in it or, you know, humus. It's gonna go to dust in August.
Okay,
And you see that sometimes, which is why here you'll notice at the senior center, we put wood chips, like a medium grind wood chips on top as a top dressing, because this is a windy, sunny site. And we get the water, I mean, the wind off the water.
Yeah.
And we get the reflected heat off all that, and it really gets hot and dry. And we noticed, when did we put that garden? We put the pollinator patch garden in two or 3 years ago. And
Yes.
that first year, it was just so hard to keep it watered. So we put the chips on and then the
Yes.
next year was much
And
easier.
when you put chips on,
We put them pretty deep.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For established
Where do you
plants.
get the wood chips
We
from?
got them from the tribe. Oh, no, we got them from the city, I guess.
City. But you can get them like at Vern's or you can get them from the tribe.
I get them from the tribe. One of the things you want to think about is,
Well, you want to get wood, not bark.
right, and you want to get barks that hasn't sat around long enough to accumulate weed seeds.
Mhm.
Right.
So at the library, we do this too, right? Every year, we
Yes.
put down compost, and then we put down chips, and then we put down compost. You don't have to take them off. We just layer,
Mhm.
because they really get used up. They get mixed
Right,
in by the worms and the critters, right? So we found the tribe, it's Port Madison Enterprise,
Right,
that's on
yes.
Hero 5.
Oh, yeah.
They have
We-
really
we
good
use them
quality,
a
they're
lot.
good delivery, we've never had weeds in their
Wood chips.
wood chips. And for compost, we really like indigo as well.
is
That's,
that a brand?
indigo is, no, I
On
think
Bond
they're-
Road.
Bond Road, yeah.
Yeah.
I think it might be Kingston technically, I'm not
Oh,
quite sure.
yeah,
But it's
someplace out there.
If you Google it, you'll find it, right?
Yeah.
But they have very reliable, very consistent, and again, never had a weed seed so far. So, and that happens when they're able to bring the temperature of their pile all the way up high enough that the weed seeds are killed. And then they bring it back down, re-inoculate, make sure that it's actually nutritious again, right? And it's a good product, but it's tricky. It takes, it's an art and a science, really.
Yeah, yeah. We had a tree taken down, a cottonwood tree that was the messiest thing ever. It's like snow in our yard and you couldn't sit out on the patio and it was awful. And the neighbors were so happy we had it taken down, but it was a big cottonwood tree. And the young arborist, who's such a nice guy, he chipped it all up. His wife was into gardening and I said, could you bring that to the lot next door? And he did.
Oh,
And he
nice.
poured it out and we had all, our paths were all wood
Yes.
chips and now wood chips are kind of gone. And I'm like, oh, I
You
want
have to
more wood
replace them. They
chips.
really did, that's the
Yeah,
point, that
it's
they
like
degrade. and-
3 or,
Yeah.
4 years, that's it. I put a weed barrier underneath. but
No, that doesn't do a thing. I used to use weed barrier and boy, I've outgrown it. Because it's such a problem. I mean, really what it does is accumulate dirt. And so then you start building a little soil bed on top of the weed
Yeah.
barrier, and then the weeds are happy as clams.
Luck in our yard, but, with that, but anyway.
I do want to give a plea to the cottonwood. So all those fluffy things that come floating down, those are the girls. Pollen is male.
Okay.
The task of the girls is to go collect the pollen out of the air. So if
Oh.
I am very allergic to a lot of things, and cottonwood is one of them. But the girls are collecting, they're actually cleaning the pollen out of the air. When they get good and loaded, they drop down and plant themselves, which is why we have
Oh.
cottonwoods growing up everywhere. But that's actually kind of cool, right?
Yeah.
They're providing a service to allergy sufferers.
Well, I had the worst allergy I've ever had. I've had allergies my whole life, but that 1 year, all of the drugs in the world didn't help. I was like drowning. And,
Yeah.
and I didn't know. And then we chopped the cottonwood down and the next year I was pretty good. So, and the next year and the next year, knock on wood.
Right.
But it had to have been
Yeah.
the cottonwood. It was-
It's a lot of pollen. And the thing is, pollen is sticky and it's heavy. So it doesn't just blow away, it falls. And then every time it's windy, like we get those windstorms, it will stir up and spread the pollen all over again.
And if you walk on it.
And if you walk on it, you're tracking it around, it gets on your
Oh, that's
clothes.
true.
You
Yeah.
know, so one of the
Yeah.
things I try to do is after gardening for a few hours, I take a shower.
Yeah.
And put my clothes in the laundry, whether they're technically dirty or not, they're covered with pollen. And you know, our faces, we will collect pollen on our eyebrows and our eyelashes. So I wash my eyes a couple times a day with baby shampoo. Really, just like, it's my eye doctor told me to try it and it makes so much difference. Right?
That's a Good tip.
No.
Here's another tip. Don't use peppermint Dr. Bronner's on your eyes. Baby shampoo.
Right, Dr. Bronner's has got the baby
It's great
stuff.
stuff. Yeah, that baby, that's what I use.
Yeah.
Yes, you have to use can't get a generic baby shampoo. You have to use the real stuff.
I use Dr. Bronner's baby shampoo. I like that product because there's a company that is really dedicated to being green. And a few years ago, they actually went and looked at all their supply chain people around the world and worked with them to create like truly sustainable, like they built factories for them. They made sure all the agricultural practices were actually sustainable and helped them get there. And paid,
Nice.
shelled out money so
You
that
wanna
they could
support
say
that.
every single ingredient they use has been sourced and is fair trade. People are getting paid properly all the way down the line. And, you know, reading the labels, you might think there's a bit woo-woo going on there, but they're really solid. It's one of the companies I feel very good about supporting.
Yeah, I always.
Buy it.
They even have it at TNC. They have TNC for sure.
Yeah,
I've said it Safeway.
Yeah,
Okay.
sometimes.
But at TNC, they also have you can get it in cartons instead of plastic.
Nice. Oh.
Which is nice.
Where is that?
At Town and Country.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, and I think I saw it at Ace, perhaps,
Oh,
the hardware.
Oh, yeah, they've got it there too.
Yeah, because I always laugh because, hippie days, you know? I remember way back.
And if you're looking for an insecticidal soap, like maybe you have mildew, like we were looking at this morning, mildew is starting to appear already because plants are having dry roots. And the roses, you know, it's really easy to say, somebody said, oh, I thought they were too wet and they were getting mildew. So, no, actually they're too dry. The roots are too dry. And so deep watering is going to help, but also you can use insecticidal soap. Well, that's pretty expensive, but you can also use Dr. Bronner's baby soap.
Yeah.
Which is very clean, and you dilute it, you know, like you would the insecticidal soap, and spray it on the foliage, and it will help fill in some of those. So every leaf has what's called stoma, little windows on top and bottom. And if you fill them in with like the compost tea, you're integrating, beneficial ingredients into your leaf essentially, right? And filling up the slots so there's no room for the bacteria or the fungus or the whatever is going to attack, right? And the soap actually smothers out the mildew. And then of course it washes down in a way. So it's not going to stay there forever. And when it breaks down in the soil, it's perfectly benign.
Okay. Do you spray it on then?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I use just a sprayer that
Mhm.
just is used for that.
Okay.
Because you want to make sure you're not mixing stuff up there too much, right?
Right.
Yeah. I do use it for, the other thing I use it for is powdered milk, because our soils don't have a lot of calcium in them. And so
Right.
for squash, I don't know if you've grown squash and seen how mildewy those leaves can get. If you spray them
And
early
the
in their
end blossom
career,
root.
yes, exactly. Spray them with skim milk. I make it out of powder milk because it's cheap, right?
Yeah.
And it never goes bad. They just did an experiment on some of the powdered milk that was left over from the Shackleton trek to the North Pole.
Oh,
And it's chemically exactly the same as what you buy on the shelf today. So they're like, don't try to worry about like if that's in your emergency supplies. It'll be good for your grandkids. The cool thing about it is you use a 10% solution. So, 10 cups of water, 1 cup of powdered milk, and you spray it on those plants that have a lot of mildew and even roses. And you'll see
Yeah.
they'll take in that calcium and makes their leaves more, just a little tougher, a little more protected.
nice.
Yeah.
Okay.
But you want skim milk because you don't want to clog it with
How
fat.
about tomatoes? Would you ever use that on tomatoes for the calcium?
You could for sure. Yeah. So I haven't ever had.
But it doesn't have mildew though, but I was just thinking for the end
Oh.
blossom, like.
Yeah.
Raw.
One thing that really helps, this is kind of funny, is coffee grounds. If you mulch with used
Yeah.
coffee grounds, that helps a lot. Compost the filters, you don't want a bunch of filters in there, but but yeah, and the other thing that's fun with tomatoes is seawater. That if you give each plant a quart of seawater and you go down on the dock all the way to the end, so you're not getting all the stuff that's right on the beach, and get some seawater, you can I put a rope around a gallon, right? To go, and fill it up and pull it up, and everyone gets this early on, just when they begin to bloom. It will integrate into the whole plant and it pops the flavor. And it's something that was developed at Cornell because back east used to be the tomato capital of the country, weirdly enough, but like
That's just
Jersey.
weird.
I know. But there were all these amazing fields and they were famous for great flavor. And then they started to lose their flavor. And one of the things they figured out is that the soils had been used over and over and over and never built back, and the salts were depleted. And so they actually developed dried ocean water, which kind of cracks me up. But you can buy it, but you buy like 50 pounds. So we don't need to buy it 50 pounds. You just go down to the water, get yourself. I've actually asked kayakers sometimes, I'm like, hey, would you come in and dip me and they'll fill up a jug from a little further out where it's
So
really.
how do you do that? Like how much and how often?
1 quart, one time is when they begin to bloom.
Okay,
That's just 1 quart per plant. Yeah,
okay.
they're specifically, it's really
Have you
interesting.
done that too, Rita?
No, I haven't.
Oh, yeah.
I use pond, we have a pond out at the adventure house. And so I would go out there and get some pond water.
It's the salt,
Salt.
really, that's.
Yeah, oh, yeah.
Isn't that funny?
That is funny. Yeah.
Really funny.
It makes a difference.
Yeah.
No, I haven't done the salt, but I have done pond water,
Yeah, well, and that will have all kinds of algal,
all kinds of
Predators,
stuff.
right.
Yeah.
yeah.
How do you get enough calcium into the tomatoes? Like I heard that I buried some Tums by my tomato plants one year and I,
Spraying the foliage with the powder milk
Powdered
solution
milk,
would
that's
do
a
it
good
really
idea.
quickly, yeah.
Yeah.
Again, when they're young, they'll integrate it
Yeah.
quickly.
Yeah.
Yeah, so you'd water and maybe spray the plant off and then spray with the milk solution so they're wet and they can take that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I would do that like in the morning probably, so that they're really an intake. Right?
Yeah.
Because just like trees, plants breathe, right? So they're an intake and then they put, at nighttime they're exuding. So you want them when they're taken in, right?
Okay. Oh, this will be fun to try.
It is fun. And do an experiment, if you
I
want.
had one of my, a friend and a boss who used to tomatoes. She just loved, she would plant 50 different kinds of tomatoes. This was back in Ohio. And I'm thinking, sitting here, wonder if she knows all these tricks.
in the Midwest, the tomatoes love the warm night.
And the soil's
they're so-
fantastic.
Yeah.
It's, if you live in Ohio, you don't really need the tricks.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay.
Put them in the ground.
I remember there's a road I went to school in Ohio. And when we drive to Antioch, one side of the road would be red and one side of the road would be like yellow-brown, because that's where the glacier moraines stop. And there's piles of rocks and stuff, and you could just see like the incredible soil, right? And then where it really wasn't quite so incredible, right? But it's amazing to me
Wow.
that there's, I have friends in Oregon who, they have that same kind of soil in the Willamette Valley. That's why it's a huge growing thing. And he took a steel rod and he was looking at me and laughing and going like this, like wiggled it all the way. And I was like, oh, you brat. Like I could get 6 inches and I'd hit a rock or I'd hit a clay.
Maybe you get.
Yeah, exactly. I was gonna say, maybe, yeah, exactly.
I couldn't believe it. He was like, you're trying to make me cry, right?
I know.
But wiggling that rod just really made me think about the soil in Ohio or, some of those places where I've gardened where it's just like, you don't need to do very much.
No.
Just love your soil, give it some compost, respectful, but it's
Here, no.
Yeah.
It just used to break my heart to watch farmland be turned into a Walmart or something. And you just think, the best soil in the planet. And you're doing that.
Yeah.
Ah. Anyway, so yeah, tomatoes, there's hope.
I started some tomatillo seeds in my garden window and they're just peeking up a little bit, but have you ever grown those?
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
And they're also, they're heat lovers. So they're slow because they're kind of,
Yeah.
and that's another one you can start inside in one of those lettuce boxes or something like that.
Uh-huh.
I have my beans starting inside. I have a little unheated.
Oh, you're starting beans inside?
I have an unheated sun porch.
Okay.
And so it That's
my
why I
next
start a lot.
question, when to start the beans.
Well, again, I'm watching those night temperatures.
Oh.
For a while, they were in the 50s.
Cold.
Now they're back in the 40s. So I figure if I have my beans 2 or 3 weeks old, it takes them about a week to germinate, right? I soak them for a few hours just in tepid water. And then I actually just sifted into the soaking water and let them, and then they'll start coming up and they're so beautiful. They unfold these wings.
I'm gonna
right?
do that when I go home. I'm gonna start beans and.
Yeah.
I started I did an experiment. I started some chard inside, and then I got sick of growing them in the window because I had too much going on in there. So I transplanted the little tiny ones outside and they stayed alive in the
Sure.
bed.
Yeah.
But the chard that I started from seed has exceeded the chard that I started in the house. So I don't know if I planted them too early outside or if there's some seeds that should just go into the ground.
Sometimes it's how we transplant. Like you always want to handle them by the leaves, not the neck,
Oh,
because that's very damaging, easy to
Oh.
damage their necks.
Not the stem.
Not the stem.
Okay,
Right?
okay.
And so you want to wait, the first leaves are called the seed leaves, and of course, they're never quite, they just look blobby, right? But after they get the first set of true leaves, they start to accelerate. And I usually wait till they have 2 or 3 sets of true leaves before I transplant. And you
okay.
just take that pair of seed leaves and use that and,
Wait, the seed leaves are which seeds are at the top?
Well, so you've got your
Bottom.
stem and there's real leaves up here. The seed leaves are down here and they're usually bigger.
Okay, right.
So when I dig it up, I'll pull those seed leaves up like from here, up like this, and use them against the stem. So
Okay.
I'm not squishing the stem. Does that make sense?
Mhm.
And hold it that way and then support it from the bottom, like carrying a kitten around, right?
Okay.
And then, cause you know when your legs tangle, right?
All right.
And then you can take them out.
Okay, good. Glad I had that. Thank you.
Yeah. I mean.
See, I knew that you could help me, like. There's so much need here.
Oh, my gosh.
I try so hard every year and every year I'm like, oh.
Well,
Who's listening?
And every year is different.
It's right.
Yeah.
Especially
Just go,
now.
oh, my gosh.
Yeah, no, we're really looking at, like, nobody knows. Every time I look on the NOAA, the NOAA sites for projected temperatures, they say plus or minus 50%. I'm like, you're guessing.
El Nino, La Nina.
Well,
Yeah,
now we're
maybe.
in what they call the Southern Oscillation, where it's like somewhere in the middle.
Okay.
Right? But we know there's very little snowpack. We know it's gonna be a dry summer, supposed to be a pretty hot summer.
Right.
So I'm thinking that mulch is really important. And making sure that when we do put the mulch down, the soil is wet before you do, because otherwise it'll suck it
Oh,
right out like a sponge, right?
I never knew that before.
Oh, yeah. So you
Like,
water well.
like the mulch even in between your plants?
Sure, yeah.
Everything.
I mean, yeah, I use these little, they're called bubblers, I think. Right, and
Yeah,
and you
yeah.
can set them high or low with water pressure, and they'll do a circle, more or less. So I'll put that in the bed for 20 minutes or so, move it, and then with my finger, I go down and say, did you get it? And if you see it's really still dry, a couple inches down, I'll put it back. But that first go round is just to get the crust softened.
Yeah.
And then you go back and then it's open and it can start to absorb better, but it's dry. It's really dry. So we want to make sure that before we do the top mulch and the dressing and all that, that you want it to be moist. So then when it's real moistened, you can put your compost down and water that. And get it, and again, the bubblers are slow delivery. They're not just gushing out, right?
Where do you get those? I've never
Ace.
seen those.
They were
Yeah.
like $6.
Yeah.
It's
They're
not
hooked up they're like this and hooked up to a hose.
exactly
Yeah,
like
and
that.
and they don't go up a lot.
No.
They're small and you don't want to, you don't need to turn the
And you
water
can set
pressure
it,
up.
and you can set it to a foot,
Okay.
2 feet or
Right.
whatever. So you can adjust it just with water pressure to exactly this, where you want it, right?
Okay.
And so I do that, and I put them in troughs even, like I have at home troughs like we have here out front. And you just can set it, it's usually 2 settings for a trough to get all of it really wet.
Yeah.
And then once it's wet, put your compost on, wet that. Then you can put your wood chips on, and you don't have to wet those, but you can. But they're really protecting everything that's in there from wind, and even a little bit from those rabbits. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Oh, yeah.
They're naughty.
When I was watering I was watering down in the front and these rabbits were shooting out, running across to Waterfront Park. It's like,
Yeah.
they're nesting in our garden, Rita.
I know, we have to watch
We have
those.
mice in our garden. I garden, but my next door neighbor moved in and she had this beautiful garden space. And she said, do you know anybody that like wants to garden? I said, yeah, me. Because I couldn't believe how much the city plots were here. I came from Tacoma where it was a lot cheaper and bigger.
Uh-huh.
But anyway,
Here's what we're talking about.
Oh, okay.
Read.
oh, thank you.
Yeah, you can see there's different models, but they're more or less like that. And they're very
Okay.
inexpensive.
Oh, great.
And you, like I said, you set them with water pressure, so they're really easy to control.
Right.
But anyway, so now she has well water. And
Nice.
and the beds were already made out and the fence was there and a greenhouse and compost bins. I mean, it was just like a gift.
Yeah,
It has
no
been for
Yeah.
5 years.
That's great.
But I still am not as successful as what I would like to be with this gift. But we get mostly sun and it's very dry, very
That's
dry. And the critters.
Right.
Now I reinforced the fence with chicken wire all around. That was a lot of work.
Yeah, that is a lot of work, but it makes a huge difference.
But I think, yeah, it just doesn't, the mice are a real problem. They're digging holes and they go
If you
underground.
put the hose in the holes, they'll collapse
Oh, okay.
and then they'll go somewhere else because.
Now we have some moles coming up too, which,
And moles usually go in overwatered lawns. That's their preferred habitat because there's a lot of worms there. So if they have the irrigation on their lawn, that's probably why you're getting moles.
oh, yeah.
But they're territorial. There's usually only a few per square mile. But
No,
Do
they
they
go to
eat the
our
plants?
house.
Or do they just dig around
they're
them?
looking for worms.
Okay.
And so they tunnel. And that's where you
But they
get,
disrupt your plants. We have these beautiful fir trees. Oh God, they're just beautiful fir trees. And one day my husband, I came home and one was toppled over. And the mold, they tunnel and they will disturb the root, the soil around the roots. We got it back up and staked it
it
up.
must have been a small tree, a young tree.
No, it's pretty, we've been there 8 years. We got it. It was probably 12 feet tall when we got it. It's a,
Oh, when you say fur, I'm thinking
Korean.
feet. And I was like, wow,
oh,
those
no,
are
it's,
some
it's like a
big ones.
Korean silver fir. So it gets to be maybe 20 feet max.
When you see that kind of activity, the hose is your best friend.
Okay.
Literally stick the hose down and turn it on full.
It took us a while to figure it out. It's pretty stupid, but now we know that moles come back. We have a mole man that comes and traps them. I know, but it's better than poison.
It is, but yeah, I mean, it makes me sad because they were here first, but
I know.
it's what there is. And mountain beavers in some places, there's, you know, it's crazy.
I
My
think
friends had a
that's
tug of war with the plant. The mountain beaver had dragged it into the hole and she was trying to pull it back. She's like, that was $23. Hanging on this thing and it's burrow. And so I
And
said,
they're around here.
Yeah.
Mountain beaver. I saw
Yeah.
one in our garden. It was
Yeah.
exporting strawberries from my strawberry patch
exactly.
Really?
in the
They're
middle of
on
the day. and
Cambridge?
with the,
Yeah,
oh,
they can walk across the bridge just
with
like
the mice. Yeah, I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what it was and I looked it up and I thought,
Whoa, I know, right? So the world is with us, which is great. But again, the hose is your friend. Like if you fill their burrow, they'll go somewhere else. It won't be your problem.
okay.
Yeah.
I just want the garden snake to stay, the gardener snake, but he might be in one of those holes.
Well, he'll find another
They
spot.
usually like warmer, drier. So they tend to be in like a stone wall if you have something like that.
Okay, yeah.
Cement walls, that's where they hang out.
Okay.
They're not down in the cold dirt,
No.
you know, because that's not their thing. But yeah, it is, it's just a constant balance and don't feel bad. Like, I think it's that Ohio thing that makes us think that we're gonna grow giant, amazing plants every year. Like in Ohio, that happened.
Yeah.
When I gardened there, I couldn't believe it. In Massachusetts, it wasn't really like that where I started gardening. It was older, you know, much depleted soil that had been, you know, used for a long time and not really treated very well. And Ohio is just like chocolate and you couldn't do anything wrong.
Well, it does depend. I mean, because we moved into a development there. So the developers, when they're building, they take all the
Scrape a lot.
topsoil off. Then they want to sell it back to you. Yeah, and I, as a new gardener, I was learning like, I thought, oh, I have this garden, really, this little bed built up, with the compost, the soil's so nice. And then I was so new at it. I thought, I went out there a couple of years later and why is it back to clay? Well, I had learned I had to keep doing this every year. It does decompose and goes back to clay.
Well, when you think about how the forest works, this was all climax forest, okay? And the soil remembers. So it takes a long time for soil to shift from fungally dominated forest soil to a bacterially dominated soil like you would see in the prairies, like in Squim, right?
Mhm.
And so the plants that like that kind of soil are, all the woody stuff will do great in the forest soil, but a lot of the perennials and the annuals are like, are you kidding me? And plus, when it was forest, every year, all year long, there was litter of lichen and
Yes.
leaves and twigs and
Yeah.
bird droppings and
And it
animal
was just, yeah.
constant. So that forest soil is really rich and deep
Mhm.
because it's constantly renourished and replenished.
Yeah.
And, somebody might take some firewood down, but they don't, but once they get clear cut, they're toast. It's just like the same as you see in the Amazon rainforest. If they're not replenished constantly, they become depleted really fast. And so it's not a one and done.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
Yeah.
It's something that you always have to do. So think of it as a pet. You gotta feed your pet.
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, just,
So Anne, I know you don't like no-till gardening. Is
Oh, I
the
do
way to
like
go.
no-till gardening.
I know you do I'm sorry, I misspoke. I know you don't like till gardening, but when you do get a whole bunch of, I was gifted a bunch of compost that looked beautiful the other day from my next door neighbor. They had too much and I was like, yeah. So, but anyway, I thought, now what do? Do I dig it in a little bit to the
No,
soil or I
No,
just leave it?
layer,
planted?
layer, right? You don't have to ever dig it in. That's the coolest part. It's like, again, if the
But-
soil is moistened before you put it on, and then you put it on,
I didn't do that.
I've put sometimes 6, 8 inches.
Okay. I
And
did.
it's never too much. You'll be amazed how quickly it gets incorporated and goes away.
Okay, so it will do that on its own.
Oh, yeah. Well,
And I can plant right into the compost.
yeah, I would often I'll mix the whole,
Oh, okay.
of the planting hole and make sure that you've got at least half of it is original soil.
Oh, yeah.
But then the rest can be really deep. And it does a lot of things. It really protects the soil. It helps build the soil back up again. And yeah, you can hardly have too much. If you're putting it around trees and shrubs, you don't put it around their neck. You put it around the drip line. Because that's the golden area where like I said earlier, the roots are crawling their way around and they're looking for nutrients. So if it's a good sized tree, you might put a yard width or, at least a couple of feet
Mhm.
and make a circle band around the drip line of that plant. So that the drip line is in the middle of your nutritive zone. Does that make sense?
yeah, I've even seen people put it too close. I don't know there's a term for it.
Yeah.
And then it actually hurts the
Yeah,
car.
it can, especially
Damages.
woody plants.
Mhm.
And some perennials will get smothered. If you've ever gone to Bellevue Botanic Garden, have you ever been over there? They have like 3,500 plants, different plants and thousands of them, and right? But when they started doing it, a lot of us would go over and volunteer. And every spring they brought in compost like crazy, right? And manure and mixed them. And then they used sticks over the crowns of all the perennials, like 2 foot tall, so that somebody actually spent a whole day marking where all they were. And so you get really deep except for that crown area. So it makes
Right.
sense.
So you
So they'd be
eliminate
like
that,
in a
yeah.
little,
Oh,
in little
Oh, okay.
valleys, sort of.
little valleys, right? Exactly. And I thought, well, that is clever. So I started doing that and it really makes a big difference.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, generosity pays. Nature's
Yes.
very generous. It's like if you have an area that you're going to go to, like maybe lawn you want to transform, just put everything there. Put, twigs and sticks and leaves and all your neighbors' leaves and all their grass clippings and sheet mulch. That whole area as deep as you can do it. And then over time, not very long either, a couple of years and all that, then you take the top stuff off and put it somewhere else and the rest of it is gorgeous and open and ready. It's so much more fun to garden like that than to be chiseling out a hole.
Yeah, yes, it is.
Right?
Yes. Yeah, we had, out at my daughter and son-in-law's house, they have a little pond. And then behind it was all this crazy blackberries. And it was, I mean, and the ground was just the clay stuff. So I got the blackberries out as much as I could. And then for a couple of years, I put wood chips this deep. And the gardeners were having a hard time. They put a little bit. I said, no, I want it this deep. And now I can dig down in that dirt and it's just, it is amazing. It's pretty amazing. And then there's a little bit of forest behind like where the yard stuff is. And when you walk back there, it smells so good and you can just barely dig. And it's just all this wonderful humus stuff back there. It's such a difference.
And how much ivy did you take out of there?
Oh, a lot. We did. I took a lot of ivy out of there and then the holly.
Yeah.
As well and cut that. And it's amazing how much better all of it was. But I could just dig and I can just go and dig in there now. And it is just amazing how awesome and soft it is.
Wow.
It makes a huge difference.
So it killed all of the roots or the blackberries?
Yeah, actually, it will do that with ivy. Kitsap County did some studies now. I was gonna say just a few years ago, but actually.
Why didn't you?
I know, but what they discovered is they were mulching in 8 inches of wood chips, 12 inches and like 15 inches or so, I can't remember, but 8 and 12 for sure. And then the next one was deeper. And they found that the 12 inches actually would kill off about 80% of the ivy within a season.
Wow.
Kill off. And what was left was easy to take out because the soil had opened up.
Yes.
And because it's wood chips, it's sort of like the old forest feeding itself, right?
Mhm.
It's not bark, it's everything, all ground up. And that nutrient, I have a client who had a really awful soil and it was second or third growth, small grunty firs too close together. And the soil was just horrible. But we brought in a whole bunch of the cheapest kind of wood chips are called hog fuel and they're pretty coarse. But since this was like back forest and she wasn't going to be walking through it, we piled that in there really, really deep. And in a couple of years, she was like so excited. She said, I might plant anything in there now.
Oh, that's so satisfying.
And it's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yeah.
And it's like nature's healing, right?
Mhm.
Just like our bodies want to heal, soil wants to heal too, right? And the thing is, even the most degraded soil has more like biotic life in it than the best compost we know how to make. So letting the soil heal itself with just a little help is, you're doing the best thing you can possibly do by feeding your soil will feed your plants too, right?
When we first moved here 8 years ago and built this house, we brought in this 5-way garden topsoil from the Native Americans right off the place you were talking about, I think 305. And they just like put tons, like 5 yards on our front yard. It was just amazing. The trees grew beautifully. I got pictures of these, we bought cheap little plants. We didn't have any money left, right? We built that.
Right.
And it was the middle of summer. So nobody wanted to water plants. So the nurseries were having, like, especially Ohms and
Yeah.
80% out, And it's beautiful now.
Yeah,
But it's starting with that soil is huge.
it is huge. It makes all the
And
difference.
now guess what? They don't sell it anymore. They don't carry it.
Oh,
Creating topsoil is challenging and it's expensive. And part of it is, they're shipping sand. Like if you add sand to clay and then put, it makes adobe, basically it bakes. It just gets tighter and tighter, but you need humus.
Mhm.
So getting the compost piece in is really important. And the 5-way mixes, like we used to joke, one of them was sand, 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 and compost.
Oh, really?
Okay, but if you get a good mixture, they're putting a lot of different things in there
Yeah.
and it's good. And you keep asking and they'll realize there's a good, but they have a 3-way that's pretty good too.
Oh, they do?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. A lot of it is what's available and what what they call the feed stream. Is it good quality? Are they getting contaminants in it? Are there a lot of weeds in it? Then they have to stop using that, find another source. So the good places really spend a lot of time making sure their quality control is pretty consistent, right?
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah. But yeah, paying for soil, that's a great example. If you spend the money on the soil, you don't need to spend as much on the plants.
Right. Yeah.
yeah, and they come back up. Yeah, we first moved at the house at Fletcher Bay. There was a big icky spot. So we got some stuff that was 70, like topsoil, and then 30 sand because we needed the drainage.
Yeah.
And we put that, again, that's like you're going, oh. But it made such a difference then when
Right.
we went to plant, and the water would then stay or go down in the ground rather than just run off.
Yeah.
In our lot, it has different kinds of soil. Like one part of it where the yard is all fenced in was just hard clay. So we just put ground cover or put a weed blocker and just put rocks. So now I have the metal bins, which get way hot, for planting, like the bins
Yeah.
out there. But our little dog was allergic to grass and it made sense at the time.
Oh my goodness.
Now she's gone, so we
Aw.
don't have grass. But it saves water.
Yeah.
Exactly. Zan would say, take as much grass as you can and make it something else.
It's kind of funny beyond the fence now where there was no grass, it was just bare dirt underneath a lot of trees. Grass has filled in. It blew in from our neighbors who behind a whole bunch of trees and it's all grassy. So we got rid of our mower.
Well, and if you wanted to do a mulching thing in there with chips and stuff, when it broke down again, you could plant, you could replace those things with like huckleberries, with some of the native perennials, like the little cream coral bells, that are native here.
That would be
Bleeding
good.
hearts, they're pretty, right? And you can
Yeah.
put in a whole bunch of,
Oregon gray.
yeah.
I've got some plum trees, 2 plum trees that are growing in there, but it's the evergreen trees
Right.
beyond us are taking a lot of the sun.
Yeah, if you don't have that
So-
much sun, fruit trees are not gonna be super happy. But
They were happy like 2 years.
Yeah, maybe.
the thing about those firs is they don't stop growing. I mean, they
Right.
live to be 800,000 years old. So, and they're young when they're huge. You think, wow, that's like 80 feet high. And it's like, yeah, and they were planted in the 60s,
Yeah.
in the 80s even,
Well,
right?
and then my husband found a good deal on those kind of trees, cedar and fir trees, and he planted more.
Well,
And it was insane.
it's, in a way it is, and in a way it's not. In a way, it's like,
Yeah.
there's a big movement called rewilding, which is like giving back the land. And one of the things they're finding, like in Ireland, they were doing some big projects on land that had been really depleted, farmed too long. I was reading this study that said in Europe and in England, Scotland, Ireland, and Holland even, the governments were saying, we think we only have 100 more, maybe 100 more harvests before this land will not support any more plants.
Oh,
Because the kind of farming they've been doing is not sustainable. They cut down all their hedgerows. They got, which meant no pollination. They had to truck the bees in after that or whatever, and constantly using the chemicals doesn't do the soil any good.
no.
And at a certain point, it doesn't pay. Because you have to use so much more fertilizer to get even, and the quality of the food has declined 30 to 50% in terms of protein value and, and flavor. So it's like, okay, rewilding is about, in a way, just stepping back and letting stuff happen. But also, because in our yards, we might not want to do that necessarily, because it can take quite a while before it actually evens out, the balance will go to weeds and then other things will grow through. But if you start planting native stuff, if you, do that mulching, get a good bed going, and you'll find that you'll have the right kind of wildlife. And they'll, like, if you have owls coming in, they'll eat your mice happily.
Yes.
I have a lot of owls.
Well, I bet you do. If you have a lot of mice, you sure
You're gonna have a lot of owls, yeah.
I wrote a poem about the barred owl who cooks for you? And it's just a villanelle. It's kind of fun.
Oh, that's sweet.
Because I had these 2 little dogs. I scurry my toy dogs out of its view.
Yeah, yeah. Because
Yep.
actually eagles have done that here too, and coyotes.
Yeah, they're everywhere.
Yep, they really are. So, living with nature means we make some compromises. It's like letting caterpillars eat some of your plant leaves and not, rushing out to spray, because that's going to turn into something that's part of the natural cycle that's, going to be somebody else's food. Everybody eats somebody all the way down the line.
Those little.
And on that note, Anne, I'm going to have to cut this conversation short, at least online. Thank you. This has been delightful. I've learned a lot as always, and you're here every month online, and maybe we'll try this again in person.
Sure. And so it's the third Wednesday and we garden in person outside from 10 to 12. And then we come in here and yak for a while from 1:30 to 2:30. So yeah. join
And you
us
can even consider joining us for lunch. Meals on Wheels is here from 12 to 12:30. And so you can sign up for lunch and have lunch with me or whoever else wants to join me.
Yeah, we could do that. That would be fun. We'll do that on the third Wednesday of
Yes.
every month.
Yes, the menu's right there.
Right?
Exactly.
There
You
you
got
go. Thank you. Thank you, ladies, very much. I appreciate your insight and lively discussion.
Right?
Okay.
Okay.